This is the A to Z podcast. Zach Jackson, Andre Knott, at Akron Jackson, at Dre Knott on most of your favorite social media platforms. Facebook.com/A to Z podcast, A to Z podcast.com. We are coming to you live Sunday night / Monday morning. I'm in the Denver airport. Andre's in the comforts of his own home, I assume, unless he's in real trouble.
Yes.
We are getting ready to recap another day in Browns history. I don't know. You're going to have to talk for a minute while I try to put these thoughts together.
Yeah, I can do that. Shout out to Zach for coming through. He's in the airport, as he said. He texted me as soon as he got to the airport and said, "Do you want to do a podcast?" I chuckled and said, absolutely. The Cleveland Cavaliers would like to thank the Browns for being who they are. Nobody knows that they lost by 20 at home tonight and gave up a triple-double. And to be quite honest, in true Browns fashion, there's so many stories, but there's so many different ways to go with this. In every pregame show today, getting ready for the Browns, everyone talked about the penalties and everyone talked about the turnover. And the Browns, and only the way the Browns can, they did not have a turnover. They won the turnover battle. They won the time of possession battle. They won the yardage battle. They won the actual penalty situation, even though the penalties that they did get came at just completely bad times and were ridiculous. But there was only 4 or 5 of them, and it's still, and saying all of those things, we sit here and we scratch our head after another loss. And it leaves this team at 2-6, and you're still questioning coaching decisions. You're still questioning the offense. You're still questioning what's most important to certain players. And then we have a situation that's truly Maria in December that we'll have to get to at some point in time, where you have a player still dressed, shooting. I shouldn't even use the word shooting. Using social media to tell everyone that he wanted to end up on Deadspin if Deadspin was still a thing. But as you know, here on the A to Z podcast, we don't even mention Deadspin because we don't want to be a part of anything that they have to do with it.
Well, what you're saying is we're questioning the makeup of the team, right?
Yeah.
Because one guy literally had to change out of clown shoes, and his explanation was 4 days wasn't enough to get new cleats when there are 550,000 pairs of cleats in the locker room alone, right? And then you have one guy in full uniform, his cleats still on, firing off tweets, threatening to kill people. So the makeup, the maturity, the composure, the poise. Dre, it's one thing when you lose games because everybody does. The Patriots got their asses kicked tonight, right? I didn't see much of it.
Yep.
I know the score. I saw 10 plays, and Mark Ingram and Lamar Jackson were running wild on 6 of them, right? It's just when you're talking about by Brown standards, okay, we're talking lowest to low, weirdest to the weird. Make you bang your head into the wall, right? And, of course, they start the speaker announcement right behind me as I'm trying to make a point here. But then, so when you start talking about by Brown standards, 8 games in, you're not sure if this coach is right. 8 games in, your receivers are doing these things, and you're like, what is going on, right? You go and play a game, everybody knows you should win. You don't tackle. You don't make plays. You don't finish drives. And then after the game, all the attention for non-football reasons is on cleats and death threats on Twitter.
Yeah. And that just comes back to, and I know it's easy to point the finger at the head coach, and he's a big part of this. And there's a lot of questions that come along with him. But it's a word that we continue to say on the podcast. Every time we go through these situations, and we keep going back to culture. This morning on the pregame shows, as you hear people talking about, the different matchups. Obviously, the New England Baltimore matchup was a big one, and it was very interesting for me to just hear how different people reacted to it. How people said this is going to be a good game. Both teams, they'll have something to play for. They respect each other. They play hard, and it surprised me the people that were able to take Baltimore because they were like, hey, it's a big night. It's a big game in Baltimore. They're putting Ed Reed into their Hall of Fame. They're going to show up. And I had a lot of people say this to me this morning, and I kind of chuckled. And when they did it, I thought, well, that's who they are. Same with Pittsburgh and Indianapolis. I looked at that game and I go, well, Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh. Even though they're not better than Indy, they'll find a way to win because they're at home. Now, I didn't know that the idiot kicker, and I know he's not the idiot kicker, he's just the old-ass kicker, would miss the field goal, gimme basically at the end of the game. But they played a certain way. They play with a certain substance, Zach. They play to win games, but they play it a way to be who they truly are supposed to be. And the Browns are doing that too because they have no culture. and it's just everything. Like, to me, like the Beckham thing, and I don't want to be that guy when it comes to Beckham, but I am right now. Every freaking week, and I use the word freaking because usually I use the other effing word, but every freaking week, it's something. Every week. It's like 1 week it's the pants, 1 week it's the visor, 1 week it's like, think about that. We've had more OBJ uniform bullshit than wins. Like, every single week. You said there's 200 pairs of shoes, inside the locker room. You're Odell Beckham Jr. You're one of Nike's guys. You can't tell me that 4 days ago, when you knew that you were going to wear their all brown uniforms, that Nike wouldn't have been able to take care of you. Stop with this bullshit. Stop with all this other stuff that's so meaningless. You wanted to wear the clown shoes. Don't give me all that bullshit. You wanted to wear them. You've been a problem every single game almost when it comes to your uniform. Now, I know Landry does it, but that to me just signifies what is most important to you. What is most important? And it's being a fashion icon, and it's having likes on Instagram, and it's having likes on Twitter. I don't want that shit. I don't think Cleveland Browns fans want, like, who wants to be a part? And then think about it, like you said, in true Browns fashion, of course the shoes are clown shoes.
I mean,
Thanks.
You couldn't make it up. You really couldn't make it up, right? And then the part with Whitehead, it's not funny. And it's not just because Dustin, who's our friend, is one of the people that he's threatening. But, like, we say this all the time, Dre. These guys are taking years off their lives every Sunday. And we have the utmost respect for what it takes to play in this league and what it's like out there between the lines. And, of course, there's emotions. And, of course, there's anger. And, of course, it's personal when you have a bad game and people are looking at you. But when you don't have the poise to handle it, and it's reflected in how you stand up and look at the camera, how you dress, how your team travels each way, right? When you were doing that, it is just it is a sign that everybody's out for themselves, that the mission is, well, by now the mission's aborted. I mean, it's November 3rd, and you're out of the playoffs with the off-season champions of the world. But just all these things going back to last week, which we haven't even talked about, right? Majoring in they petition to get the uniforms. They wear the shoes. Right. And then the tweeting incident. Like, it sucks for these guys to stand up there and talk, right? Like, I get it after the games, but it is part of their jobs. It is written clearly in their contracts, and it is on them as professionals, because they are professional football players working for a billion-dollar franchise in a multi-billion-dollar industry, to stand up and answer the questions for the camera, right? To not go on and do that and reflect poorly on yourself, your team, and everyone who's ever met you. And you go around that locker room, and halfway through the season, it just still feels like 53 individuals. And it feels like all these questions are ridiculous, but they're valid. Because what do we see? When does the truth come out? Every Sunday at 1 o'clock or 4 or 8:20, right?
Yep. It does.
Here it is.
And it's like, I mean, you know how much money we could have won or lost if we would have went to Vegas at the beginning of the season and said, when you were going into week 10, that one team would be 6-2 and one team would be 2-6 when Buffalo and Cleveland played at Cleveland Browns Stadium next Sunday. Think about that. Like, and I keep going back to, like, and are they a better, like, on paper, would you want Buffalo's roster over the Cleveland Browns roster? I'd say no. But once again, we go through these things, like, and I've said all along, and I remember saying to you when the whole Kareem Hunt thing came along, I was like, I'm not worried about the receivers not getting along, about get the ball thrown to it. I go, I'm worried about when you get him, because suddenly, and look, he's not going to be a top 5 running back next week, but he's a top 5 running back when he's right. Mm-hmm. Nick Chubb's the top 5 running back when he's right. But now your coach doesn't put him in on 3rd and 3 or 4th and 1. And I don't want to be that guy, but it comes back to Freddie at times too now. And it's like, well, Freddie, what are you doing on 3rd and shorts? Or even when you in 4th and 1, when you want to sneak the quarterback, you got Hilliard in backfield. If Chubb is that tired, if he's that something, you can at least say, hey, Nick, just go back there and stand and don't move. That at least gives the defense something else to think about. I know Freddie knows more football than me. I know that and we all get so caught in the moment that we say things about Freddie or about coaches because we're frustrated. It seems so simple, but it is simple, and that's why it's bothersome. I now text you once a week, every Sunday, Jim Frantz offense once again beating the Browns. Jim Frantz thought process beating the Browns. And my point is, the most remedial high school thinking way of coaching and the most standard way of coaching is beating them because they can't do the standard things. Like, why do you not have blocking and tackling? It's that simple. Blocking and tackling.
This is the A to Z podcast. We are presented, as always, by Cleveland Scene, by the Honeymoon Grill, by American Fireworks, and Cleveland Whiskey. We try to talk other things other than the Browns, but it is Sunday night / Monday morning. It was a day in Browns history, so here we are. I'm in the Denver airport, and we're talking about all that we saw and heard. Dre, Chubb not being in in 3 short yardage plays is inexcusable.
Yeah.
When it happens once, there was either a miscommunication or there was a rotation and he didn't want to bust it, right? When it happens 3 times, like you said, just having him in there, I mean, this is a rare talent. And
right.
It just speaks to the overall operation, right? I mean, I said this earlier. We talk about every game in the NFL taking on a life of its own, right? Every team has good players, even the Dolphins, who won today, right? Even the Redskins and the Bengals. And every team matches up differently. Every team has coaches that put in hundreds of hours of work and has access to all the film and all the scouting reports going back to high school and all of these elaborate coverages and shit that will just blow your mind or bore you to death or both, right? So it comes out. And there are upsets, and there are things you have to do tactically, and there are plays you just have to make. In basketball, we call them 50-50 balls, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with the Browns' offense is that each possession, they're like starting anew. You truly don't know what to expect. I mean, I think this is the 3rd straight game we saw 2 or 2.5 quarters of pretty good from the passing game, right? The rest of the time, it wasn't good enough. After the bye week, you clean things up, you self-scout, you get your own tendencies, you throw some plays out, you put some plays in. Well, this week in a game you needed to win, and you knew you needed to get the lead and put the pressure on this quarterback in this limited offense. You just got to get Nick Chubb going. It's just got to be, if you overdo it, and you rest him another week, right? And it didn't happen because that is who you are, and that what works for you. And I'll say this: Pharaoh Brown was out. He's a blocking tight end. He gives them a lot.
Yep.
I mean, if you're missing him that badly, then woo-wee. Maybe you weren't as talented as you thought from the start.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Half the conversations on radio throughout the week are about Hollywood Higgins. No offense to Hollywood Higgins. I like his name. I even call him Hollywood now after 2 years calling him Richard. But you have 2 of the best receivers and 2 of the highest-paid receivers in the NFL, and I got to hear about a 3rd wide receiver that may just be a 4th receiver who's a decent pro. But that's where this team is at right now. And we tried to connect and talk about the quarterback earlier in the week before the game. And his antics are pretty juvenile as well, whether it's the cutting the mustache after the game. And to me, all that just shows me a lack of what matters most. The whole grossy thing is what it is. And I don't even have to get into it because I don't have to get into it. But his decision-making, and this is where I think a big problem for him, and I think the big thing with John Dorsey, and whoever made the decision to make Freddie the coach, the decision's been made. As I've always heard me to say, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're not putting it back in. But the issue that I'm starting to get is not suddenly the quarterback that we all thought. We had this conversation a little bit on the last podcast, but to continue that, the quarterback isn't getting better. And whatever Freddie and Ken Zampese were doing with him a year ago, you saw him progress. But now he's at that point. That throw to Landry on 4th and 4 after the 3rd and 1, you didn't get it, trying to run Chubb on a play that wasn't even blocked, but that's nor here nor there. But that's why you got Odell. And I heard Dustin say this in a post game, and he was absolutely right. The 4th quarter was a big Odell quarter and a big Chubb quarter. They basically went all the way down the field in that last drive just with Chubb and Beckham. When you get Beckham one-on-one, and I know Chris Harris is a well-thought-of cornerback. He can play his position very well. He's a veteran. And I don't know if you saw this, Zach. Landry got the ball tipped twice. If he would have made the play, it would have been a spectacular catch. And Odell said all the right stuff post-game. Caps off to him. He said he would throw to 80 10 times out of 10. I heard that, and then I'm still thinking, and I respect him for that, because he very easily could have said, fuck yeah, throw me the goddamn ball. I got one-on-one coverage. That's why I'm here. And I'm not trying to beat up on the quarterback. And I'm not trying to beat up on Ryan Lindsley, because I don't even know him, and I think he's a good guy. But there's a difference between having a quarterback, like in any situation. I've watched this happen with the Indians. I've watched it with others. Former players that just got done playing, coaching, guys that they played with, or guys that they knew. It's a difficult thing to do. It's way different than a coach that's done it for years and years and years than someone right out of the league. The Browns and Dorsey have allowed a very young offensive coordinator, head coach, a very young quarterback coach, basically the first time doing it. Think about that. They're letting these guys that are rookies, kindergartners, bring up and try to cultivate this quarterback that you need to be your quarterback. It's not a good move, and you see it every Sunday. He's not progressing. That's a bad read. When two guys run to the spot that Jarvis Landry is going to go running to on the biggest play of the game, and he doesn't see it, and he still tries to force it in there. When you got Odell Beckham Jr., a guy that's got clown shoes, the guy that's got Gucci watches and everything else, and got a car with him grabbing the ball with one hand all over it, and the worst paint job of all time is on your fucking team, and you don't throw it over to him with the safety not over the top?
Right.
That's not good coaching. That's not good coaching.
I haven't seen the replay of that play yet, amid all the madness. But I absolutely trust what you said and what you saw, and several other people who I know they know what they're watching kind of said the same thing. Baker trusts Landry more. That part is understandable. They called timeout, which was the right thing to do in that spot because it's fourth in your life. You should have called timeout 20 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
So you look at it two ways, Dre. And again, what do we say here? It can be both. It can be in the middle. He knew where he was going. That's the play they called, and he was always going there, and that's bad, right?
Yep.
But it could have been good. Also, it's just not. The Odell Beckham experiment has been a freaking disaster, right?
Yep.
For Odell, for Baker, for the Browns, and what I don't get and what I'm going to have to dive into is any sport, right? When your lead guy is struggling, you got to do things to boost him, right? And that's in the manager and the coach's office, one-on-one, which we don't ever see. That's with his position coach, coordinator, trainer, whomever it may be. Get back to the fundamentals, and then you give that guy some plays. If it's a point guard, his favorite plays, right? If it's a pitcher,
right.
If it's a pitcher, you tell him we're gonna hit these spots right now, first 6 pitches, right? And take the rest from there. We're gonna get you in a groove. And I just see every single drive, I see something new from the Browns. There's just no traction. There's just nothing to build on. And even on that last drive, when Chubb and Beckham both just made plays to get extra yards, 3rd and 1, the Broncos knew exactly what was coming. And on 4th down, they did too, because they had 2 guys deflect that pass. How often do 2 guys get credit for a pass deflection in the NFL? Not often. Usually only when something crazy goes off someone's helmet or the side of someone's hand first, right?
Right.
And the red zone offense stinks, and the fade is not a super high percentage play. But why is Odell here? To make those
because
plays.
He can make
to be the dimension that you haven't. He's here to be the dimension that you haven't, and instead he's a black hole and he's sucking you in. And it's not all on him, and it's not all on Baker. But the quarterback is regressing. The whole operation seems lost, which seems a Monday to Saturday thing that's carrying over to Sundays. And the guy who makes all this money and brought all this fanfare and brings all this extra in made 2 plays tonight and just 2, and they were the first freaking 2 in weeks. And he has no real chemistry with your quarterback who's swimming and your head coach and play caller who's swimming. And just let me get to this. It's 12:47 a.m. Eastern time. I don't know what's going to happen on Monday, on Tuesday, after the Steelers game, after the season. I don't know that Fire and Freddie makes it any better, but for the second straight week, it's a valid conversation. And to go back to the top of the show, even by the Browns standards, as ridiculous as it would seem to fire the coach 8 games in, they're not getting better, Dre. I could argue that today was the worst since week 1.
Well, it's up there. Well, and I'll go back to the Jermaine Whitehead situation. And the scary thing for Jermaine Whitehead, and the cool thing about the thing that he had going for him before this is that the casual Browns fan, guy that watches the game every week, barely knew who Jermaine Whitehead was or is, right? The average fan. As you get deeper into it and as you really pay attention, you may get to know who he is. And then you find out, because I remember a couple of weeks ago and I kept seeing his name, I kind of looked him up and I was like, oh, yeah, that's the dude that the Packers had to cut because he slapped somebody.
Right.
And I remember kind of chuckling. And I remember kind of chuckling to myself. And not like a laughing at him chuckle, but just kind of a like, damn, you get cut for hitting somebody in the NFL. You got to be a dumbass. Like, not even dumbass. I don't want no smoke, literally and figuratively, Jermaine. And I remember thinking to myself, man, if Dorsey thinks you're talented, he'll let you get to come right into the door, right? And then when that happened today, I'm like, Jermaine, you had a good thing going, man. You're playing every game. You're out there, whether you had a good game or bad game, you're making a good living, decent living. You're building up a penchant probably towards the NFL. And most people probably don't even recognize you most of the time. You had a shitty Sunday. It happens to everyone. People miss tackles. The Browns miss more than most and the other teams. But everybody's missed tackles. And there's been DBs that have made a ton of money and become great and been patted on their back. And some have put on yellow coats, even though they couldn't really tackle. But they were, they made a bunch of plays. So you had a horrendous day today. It happens to everyone. And we always talk about social media and when to say when. And if you have to question it, then you should not send it. We've had all those discussions on this podcast. But I heard something when I heard my guys, Gerard Cherry, I was listening on the radio, and Emmett were talking about something. Gerard said something that hit home for me because it kind of goes off of what you always talk about with social media. And Gerard said for him to think of a player, and I'm taking it, and I'm not saying verbatim what Gerard said, but I'm giving him credit because it shot home for me. He said for a guy to come right off the football field and to get on his phone and start tweeting the madness that Jermaine Whitehead was willing to tweet, to him, that showed a reckless abandon and no respect for the organization and the team that you play for.
Absolutely.
Right. You have no fear. You have no respect. You don't give a shit about anybody but you. And if that's what continues to keep happening from these players, that is a reflection upon the Cleveland Browns. It's not Jermaine Whitehead. It's not. And same thing, and some people won't like this, but I go back to last Wednesday or Thursday with what happened with Baker Mayfield and Tony Grossi. I'm not the biggest Tony Grossi fan. I get it, but there's something about being professional. It's something about carrying yourself and being someone that looks like you always say. Our dads told us you dress for the job that you want. You act like the job that you want. No matter how bad somebody pisses you off, no matter how stupid the fucking question is, no matter how many times it's asked, no matter how many different ways it's asked, no matter how bad their breath is or how bad their outfit is or how fat they may be, there's still something about having some freaking respect for people. And that's what we see at 1 o'clock. I know you guys go back and forth and you want to kill Mary Kay, and not literally, but you want to talk crap about her about Twitter. You want to talk crap about Grossi or Zach or me or whomever. But when of those, because most of you guys realize this, but when do those people that take the sides of the players think about, damn, what's wrong with just being professional? Like when I go to Chick-fil-A, man, they're so nice to me. They make the chicken, and they don't mess nothing up. Thank you. Have a good day. And we mock that, but that's the job. That's what they're told to do. Be professional. Make people feel good about themselves. Because I got to tell a funny. Because we all know Popeyes is going to come out and they're going to do the best joke ever. They're going to come out with the best chicken sandwich again on a Sunday when they know we're not even open. But that's a whole other conversation. What is wrong with being professional? So when we sit here right now and we talk about Jermaine and we talk about what Whitehead did tonight, and he should never play a game for the Browns ever again. He really needs to get his head looked at because this is ridiculous what he did. And if you read Zach's story on The Athletic, I won't give it all away. I had heard bits and pieces of what you wrote before I read what you wrote today. But for an official for the Cleveland Browns to tell someone, hey, man, and I wasn't there, Zach was, but for an official to say you need to take those tweets down or that's not how we do things, and for him to go back at him, that represents no respect of the Cleveland Browns. Right. No respect for your teammates, no respect for the fans that pay for it, no respect for the reporters that come to do their job and just tell the story, and no respect towards the man that played the sport that you played and played the position you played. if you allow that to represent you, then the Browns don't give a shit about anybody but themselves.
We have always said that in pro sports, perception is reality, right? And there's exceptions.
Yep.
But for years and years, why have teams had their own PR staffs? Because to an extent, they got to control the message, right? Because to an extent, they need to get out there. And why in the modern day do they have PR staffs and radio shows and Instagram teams and social media coordinators and managers and directors and whatever? Because sometimes you're in a bad spot. Everybody loses, right? It sucks. I've worked for a team. I know. Dre works for / with the team all the time. Yeah. He knows, right? This is how it goes. But something really struck me last week with Baker after that, and it rings even truer tonight with Jermaine Whitehead. You know, when someone said, and I know Tom Brady famously had one spat with a reporter, but someone said, you know, where do you see this? And I know people love Baker because he's Baker, right? And he's unapologetically Baker. And Freddie's different, and this is, you know, Jarvis Landry was given away by the Dolphins, and they represent all of this. But at the core of it, and I'm not to bring Jarvis in it because I think he's an absolute pros pro. At the core of it, this shit doesn't go on anywhere else. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. I don't want to hear it. So please, blame Tony Grossi. You guys sound like such losers. Blame Mary Kay.
You do.
You guys sound like such losers, right? The Browns have a tremendous culture problem. It's being dunked on you. It's being drilled into you again and again. And it's just sad, guys. It's just sad. They've had a really bad few weeks. I'm not saying firing the coach is the answer. I'm certainly not saying it isn't. I'm not saying that they don't need a total reboot in culture, in leaders in that locker room, in guys that can freaking tackle. And I get it. You know, when you win, you dance, right? But listen, let me tell you this. Early, when I was up with the time change and the time zones and all that, I was up at 5:45 a.m. today, Denver time. And it was brought to my attention because I'm always talking about social media and on social media with this podcast and my job and everything else. It was brought to my attention that a high school football player in the area had a post. I don't know if it was Snapchat or Instagram. I saw a screenshot of it where he threatened a coach of a team that they played. And it was an indirect threat. I don't think the cops are really going to threaten him. I think maybe they talk to him, right? But this is a 19-year-old kid, right, who really, needs an imaginary slap, and his parents need an imaginary slap, and the rest of it gets solved by the team running until they puke on Monday, and then the kid sits out for a quarter or a half, and everybody goes on and he learns a lesson about how dumb that was and how he embarrassed his parents and his coaches and his teammates and put himself before the team. Right? When a 26-year-old adult is doing it, Dre, amid all this other shit, it's so, so, so embarrassing.
Right. Who are you letting in your locker room? Who are you letting in your clubhouse? Who are you allowing this to be your culture? If I am the owners of the team, that's got to be a question that's got to be asked tomorrow morning. That's got to be a question. Who are we? What are we representing? Why are we constantly in the news for the wrong reasons? Hit the media constantly. You have more public relation nightmares than victories. And every time somebody goes, fire Freddie, I see him tweet it the whole time. You guys know that whole thing about insanity, doing the same thing. I know you guys do, and I'm not talking to Zach. But think about this, and I want everybody to breathe on this. You guys tweet out, fire this guy, fire this guy, fire this guy every year. And the same people keep going through the same process, and you keep seeing the same thing happen over and over again. They haven't changed who they are to change the culture to say, this is the standard we're going to go by. Whether it's Romeo Crennel, the coach, whether it's Eric Mangini, the coach, whether it's Pete Summerall, whoever. Because the same, right now, and this is sad, for as bad as it was under Hugh Jackson, Hugh could run a game better than Freddie Kitchens. It's just the truth. I mean, it's the tallest midget contest, and but the truth is the truth, y'all. Like,
who would you pay more for on Cameo, Freddie Kitchens or Hugh Jackson?
Freddie all the way. I don't ever need to hear Hugh talk ever again. I want Freddie to go back to being Freddie. Freddie wasn't ready to be a head coach. That wasn't Freddie's fault. It wasn't Freddie's fault. He wasn't ready. He was not ready. But why? And we go back to this. In a culture, why would you let this guy lead you at this time, at this point in time, when you haven't established who you are and what you want to be? So you have a quarterback that's immature and a little bit of a dick at times who leads you and he gets to speak for you twice a week. You have a head coach who's never had the experience of having to be in the spotlight like this, and he sounds a little bit like he's from Dukes of Hazzard, and that's fine, but it gets made fun of as soon as you start making mistakes. And, you just go down, these are the people that represent you. You have this uber star who's more of an uber star than a football player, to be completely honest, and he – I'm gonna bite my tongue. There's something about him that reminds me of someone else, but I don't want to talk about it on this podcast. Sometimes people talk. Some of the most long-winded talkers, they feel like they're smarter than you, and they feel like they can talk their way through anything. That's what I hear sometimes. All I'm saying is sometimes when I hear Beckham and his long-winded answers, I think he's a really cool guy. I think he's intelligent, but sometimes I think he's just trying to talk through anything because he thinks he can talk through. I just call bullshit.
All right, listen.
Sorry.
So I'm going to board here in about 15 minutes. I want to make sure this gets uploaded for the morning. Okay, so we're going to shift gears onto a couple things here. First of all, I just want to say, guys, football's supposed to be fun, right? And when you have an emotional investment, I get it. You get angry, right? And that's why Jermaine Whitehead was responding to tweets. Because people were angry, and I get it. You got angry and picked a side in the thing this week, and even today. I mean, it was so embarrassing for me during the game to click in my mentions of a tweet and see random fan bringing up Tony Grossi time and time again. Just get a grip. But I do want to say, as I watched the London game, because I know they have 4 or 5 of them every year, and 2 years ago I got to go over there and see that. This is the first one I got to watch this morning. Because the Browns didn't play till later, and it was on at 7:30. I had seen bits and pieces of the others, but what I remember from being over there is 2 things specifically about the football part of the experience. They loved the kicking plays, right? They just went nuts on any extra point, field goal, punt. They just went nuts. But as you walked the concourse, they were there in just the most random jerseys, right? It was Browns Vikings, and people were there in a Muhsin Muhammad Panthers jersey. Right, and a Robbie Gould Bears jersey. That's just, and as they panned the crowd today, and there was a Drew Brees jersey in the Texans Jaguars game, right, and there was a Lawrence Taylor jersey, and I just thought, this is cool. And so who knows if those are Americans, if they're transplants, if they're just there, or if it's British people who said let's go to the game and they got on eBay or whatever and they found a jersey. It's cool, it's fun, and I tell that story because when I was up at 5:45 this morning. I had gone to bed really early. Frankly, the altitude kicked my ass. My sinuses are bad this time of year anyway, and I was in Colorado Springs for the first couple days where it's even higher than Denver, and it was bad. I was in a bad way. Remember, you wanted to record on Friday, and I said, I can't hold my head up. I can't do this. Right. So anyway, it's 5:45 Sunday. There's nothing up. There's nothing open. So I ordered some food to get delivered to my room and just basically started working and got ready to stretch myself out. And so 6:25, there's a knock on the door with my food delivery from DoorDash or Uber Eats, whatever it was. And there's this maybe mid-50s guy dropping off the food, and he's wearing a Clinton Portis Redskins jersey. And I just, I was all groggy, and he's probably looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I looked back at him, and I just said, hey, man, have a good day. And he said, you have a great Sunday. And I just thought, man, we love football. We're lucky to have it. And I'd love to tell you guys that eventually the Cleveland Browns will be back and it'll be fun again. But because honestly, in the hours that passed that drive, I was texting with friends saying, remember the first 3 weeks of the season when it was actually fun? To look forward to the Browns games? And it's just all these off-field circuses and all the stuff that points to them not just not being ready, but not being about winning. It's just such a turnoff. It just really is. Yeah. It's not a likable team. It's not a likable team right now, and I hate that because guys like Odell and Jarvis are super likable. Miles, super likable. Denzel Ward, the nicest kid in the world. Joe Schobert, right? Like Sheldon Richardson, Olivier Vernon, those dudes are characters. People should, Larry Ogunjobi, great guy. You should love this team, and and Freddie, right? He's the everyman. He looks like a Clevelander. He acts like a Clevelander. He cusses like a Clevelander. He just has a little bit of a twang. And instead they're this. All right, one story as we get out of here. So,
all right.
If you guys have listened, you know our sponsor is American Fireworks. We appreciate them. They've been with us a long time. And I heard a story this morning that makes me think that someone is listening to American Fireworks. One of the things we do on this podcast is we talk about outrageous sports parents and lack of priorities and whatever. Apparently this weekend there was a 7-8-year-old football championship game. I'm not going to say where, or I'm not going to say who. I don't know if this got out there, but one of the teams knew they were going to win, and obviously listening to the A to Z podcast and knowing of the top quality products at American Fireworks in Hudson, they went and purchased a bunch of high quality, high dollar fireworks, Dre. And they brought them to the game, and when they won this Super Bowl of 7- and 8-year-old football in the Cleveland suburbs, they decided to lay these fireworks out without permission, without telling anyone, and on someone else's school property. They let them all off.
Great.
And so little Billy and little Donnie and little Jermaine, who clearly are all going to the NFL someday. This is just the first championship. They celebrated in broad daylight with their parents shooting off fireworks. And the cops and the administrators and everybody running the tournament saying, "What in the hell are you doing?" So listen, don't be like them and shoot them off where you're not permitted to, but be like them and hit up AmericanFireworks.com because they're open 24/7. They're in Hudson. They're good people. And listen, they're pissed off about the Browns too. Thanks for listening.
I have more to say, but that's the best finish ever. I'm done.
Konnichiwa, Bottle Rockets.